The black girl was left on the tracks with a note, "Unwanted." The rich rancher pulled the girl close as the morning train's whistle screamed across the desolate Texas rails. The trembling child, no more than 7, lay bound with rope while townspeople gathered like vultures, muttering about curses and someone else's burden. They expect her to disappear into the overcrowded state orphanage, forgotten like yesterday's newspaper. But the weathered giant dismounts his horse, his calloused hands gentle as he cuts her free. This broken widower carries secrets darker than his reputation, a violent past that could destroy them both if exposed. The mute girl clutches a hidden locket that holds the key to a fortune beyond imagination, while shadowy figures circle closer, hunting for what she represents. Will his protection save her, or will his buried sins condemn them both to destruction? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The morning sun cast long shadows across Gideon Drake's weathered face as he rode toward Red Mesa. 2 years had passed since Margaret's death, yet the pain remained fresh as an open wound. The townspeople whispered about the reclusive rancher who once rode as the Falcon, a bounty hunter whose name struck fear into outlaws across Texas. Smoke still rose from his chimney when he left at dawn, but the house felt empty without her laughter. Margaret had been his anchor, the reason he hung up his guns and chose peace over violence. Now he drifted through each day like a ghost haunting his own life. The train whistle pierced the morning air as Gideon approached the station. Something was wrong. The locomotive had stopped short of the platform, and passengers pressed their faces against the windows. A crowd gathered near the tracks, their voices carrying on the wind. Gideon spurred his horse forward and saw her. A small black girl, no older than 7, lay tied to the steel rails with thick rope. Her dress was torn and dirty, but the fabric spoke of quality. A handwritten note was pinned to her chest with the word "Unwanted" scrawled in crude letters. "Someone should cut her loose," a passenger called from the train car. "Not our problem," Sheriff Williams replied, adjusting his hat. "Probably some traveling show dumped her when she became a burden." Gideon dismounted and pushed through the crowd. The girl's eyes were wide with terror, but she made no sound. Her dark skin was bruised, and her small hands were raw from struggling against the ropes. "What are you planning to do with her?" Leonard Kane stepped forward, his county clerk badge catching the sunlight. "The state orphanage is already overcrowded. She can't stay there," Gideon said, kneeling beside the girl. His knife made quick work of the ropes. Kane's eyes narrowed. "A man in your condition shouldn't take on such responsibility." The words stung, but Gideon ignored them. He lifted the girl gently, feeling how light she was, how she trembled against his chest. She clutched a small object in her palm, hiding it from view. "You're making a mistake," Kane continued. "A widower with your reputation has no business raising a child." The townspeople murmured their agreement. They remembered the Falcon's bloody work, the men who never returned from his hunts. Some called him a hero for cleaning up the territory. Others whispered he was no better than the killers he tracked. Gideon placed the girl on his horse and swung up behind her. She fit perfectly in the circle of his arms, small and fragile as a bird. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She remained silent, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Dr. Sarah Chen pushed through the crowd, her medical bag in hand. She was new to Red Mesa, a refined woman from back east who seemed out of place in the dusty frontier town. "Let me examine her," she said. "She may need medical attention." Kane stepped between them. "The child is a ward of the county until proper arrangements can be made. She needs care, not bureaucracy," Dr. Chen replied. Gideon studied the doctor's face. Something familiar flickered in her expression, a recognition he couldn't place. "You knew my wife?" Dr. Chen nodded slowly. "Margaret wrote to me before she died. She mentioned you often." The words hit Gideon like a physical blow. Margaret had written letters. She'd never mentioned corresponding with anyone from her past. A well-dressed man emerged from the passenger car, his expensive suit marking him as someone of importance. Vincent Cross carried himself with the confidence of wealth and power. "Tragic situation," he said, approaching the group. "I've been traveling through Texas on business. Perhaps I could help locate the child's family." Kane brightened at the offer. Mr. Cross owns several businesses in Austin. His resources could be valuable. Cross studied the girl with calculating eyes. She has distinctive features. "Someone will be looking for her." The girl pressed closer to Gideon, her breathing quick and shallow. Whatever Cross represented, she wanted no part of it. "I'll take her home," Gideon announced. "You can't just claim a child like lost livestock," Kane protested. "There are procedures, legal requirements." "Then we'll follow them," Gideon replied. "But she's coming with me now." Dr. Chen stepped forward. "I'll examine her at Mr. Drake's ranch. She needs rest and proper care." Cross smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "Of course. The child's welfare is paramount. I'll be staying in town for several days. Perhaps I can assist with any inquiries." As they prepared to leave, the girl opened her palm slightly. Gideon caught a glimpse of an ornate locket, far too expensive for an abandoned child to possess. She closed her fingers quickly, but not before he saw the intricate engravings on its surface. The ride to his ranch passed in silence. The girl sat perfectly still, but Gideon felt her watching everything. She moved with unconscious grace, her posture speaking of education and refinement despite her current state. At the ranch house, she hesitated at the threshold. Then something changed in her expression. She stepped inside as if she'd been there before, her eyes taking in details with startling familiarity. Dr. Chen arrived shortly after with her medical supplies. While she examined the girl, Gideon retreated to Margaret's room. He pulled out her diary, something he'd avoided reading since her death. The final entries caught his attention. Margaret had written about a child, about arrangements and promises made. Her handwriting grew urgent toward the end, mentioning names he didn't recognize and fears she'd never shared. From the main room came a sound that stopped his heart. The girl was humming, her voice barely a whisper, but the melody was unmistakable. It was Margaret's lullaby, the one she'd sung when she thought he wasn't listening. A song she claimed her mother had taught her, passed down through generations. Only Margaret had known that tune. Yet somehow, this silent child carried it too. 3 days passed before the girl spoke her first word. Amelia. She whispered it while drawing pictures with charcoal from the fireplace, her small fingers creating images that made Gideon's blood run cold. A man with a distinctive scar across his cheek. A large house with tall windows. And always. The same scene repeated, a bearded man falling while the scarred man stood over him. Dr. Chen visited daily, bringing medical supplies and patients. She worked with Amelia slowly, never pushing, always gentle. "She's seen terrible things," she told Gideon after the 3rd session, "but she's stronger than she appears." Leonard Kane arrived that morning with new documents. His boots struck the porch boards with authority as he approached the door. "I've spoken with the territorial judge. You have until the end of the week to produce legal guardianship papers or surrender the child." "What's your real interest in this?" Gideon asked. Kane's smile never reached his eyes. "Public welfare, nothing more." After Kane left, Gideon returned to Margaret's diary. The entries from 2 years ago painted a different picture of his wife's final months. She'd worked for a wealthy family in Austin before their marriage. The Ashford house, she'd written. "Little Amelia asks for me every day." The name struck him like lightning. Theodore Ashford owned half the railroad lines in Texas. His death 3 months ago had made headlines across the territory. Accidental poisoning, the papers claimed. No surviving family mentioned. Amelia appeared in the doorway, her dark eyes fixed on the diary. She pointed to Margaret's photograph on the dresser and spoke her second word. "Maggie." The pieces began falling into place. Gideon pulled out the locket Amelia had been clutching. The engravings showed 2 intertwined letters, T and A. Theodore Ashford. Inside was a miniature photograph of a distinguished man with kind eyes and Amelia's distinctive cheekbones. Dr. Chen found them there an hour later. "Margaret wrote to me about Amelia 6 months before she died. She was terrified something would happen to Theodore Ashford. She never mentioned working for the Ashfords. Margaret kept many secrets to protect the people she loved. Dr. Chen opened her medical bag and withdrew a sealed envelope. She asked me to give you this if anything happened to her. Gideon's hand shook as he read Margaret's final letter. The truth unfolded in her careful handwriting. She'd been Amelia's governess and companion after the child's mother died in childbirth. Theodore Ashford had been like a father to Margaret, treating her as family rather than hired help. But someone had been stealing from Ashford's railroad company. Margaret had discovered the theft and threatened to expose it. When Ashford started asking questions, both their lives became forfeit. Margaret's letter contained a desperate plan. If anything happened to Ashford, trusted friends would bring Amelia to Gideon. The abandonment at the train tracks had been carefully orchestrated protection. The final revelation hit hardest. Ashford had legally adopted Amelia when her birth parents died, making her his sole heir. The quiet girl, drawing pictures by his fireplace, was worth more than most small towns. Vincent Cross returned that afternoon with Sheriff Williams in tow. His expensive suit was pristine despite the dusty roads, and his confidence had grown since their first meeting. "I've been making inquiries about our little mystery. Theodore Ashford had business associates in Austin who might remember a missing child." Gideon studied Cross more carefully. The man moved like a predator, his eyes cataloging every detail of the ranch. When Amelia appeared, Cross's expression shifted to barely concealed hunger. "She's quite distinctive," Cross said. "I'm certain we can locate her family with proper resources." Amelia backed toward Gideon, her small hand finding his. She whispered something so quietly only he could hear it. "Scared man." The description from her drawing suddenly made sense. Cross bore a long scar across his left cheek, partially hidden by careful grooming. Amelia had seen him before. That evening, Dr. Chen helped piece together the remaining puzzle. Margaret's medical records showed she'd died from smoke inhalation, but her body had contained traces of laudanum. Someone had drugged her before setting the fire. "Cross has been asking questions around town," Dr. Chen reported. "About your past as the Falcon, about how many men you've killed." Gideon felt the familiar weight of his holstered pistol. He'd sworn never to draw it again, but protecting Amelia might require breaking that promise. He's not here for her welfare. The next morning brought the final piece of evidence. Amelia had hidden more than just the locket. Sewn into the lining of her dress was a bank draft bearing Theodore Ashford's signature. It transferred temporary guardianship of his adopted daughter and her inheritance to one person, Gideon Drake. The document was dated 1 week before Ashford's death. Somehow, the railroad magnate had known his time was running short. Margaret had arranged everything, using her connection to both men to protect the child they both loved. Cross arrived with Kane and 2 hired men just as Gideon finished reading the document. "I'm afraid we can't wait for legal procedures," Cross announced. "The child's safety is at stake." "Whose safety?" Gideon asked. Cross's smile vanished. "You killed my brother 15 years ago. James Rivers died by your gun in Dodge City." The confession hung in the air like smoke. Cross was Joseph Rivers, the younger brother who'd sworn vengeance against the Falcon. He'd spent years planning this revenge, working his way into Ashford's business, earning trust while stealing everything he could. "You murdered Ashford when he discovered your embezzlement," Gideon said. "And your precious Margaret when she threatened to expose me." Rivers dropped all pretense. "But killing you quickly would be mercy. Instead, I'll take everything you care about, just like you took my family." Amelia stepped forward, no longer the silent, terrified child. Her voice carried clearly across the room. "You killed my papa. I saw you put poison in his medicine." Rivers laughed. "The little witness speaks at last. Too bad no one will believe her testimony." But Gideon's hand moved to his gun with the fluid motion that had made the Falcon legendary. Some skills never faded, only waited for the right moment to resurface. The protector had awakened, and Joseph Rivers had made a fatal miscalculation. Rivers' men flanked the doorway while Kane blocked the rear exit. The trap had been carefully set, but Gideon's years as the Falcon had taught him to read situations quickly. 3 armed men, 1 child to protect, and limited space to maneuver. "Draw your weapon," Rivers commanded. Let's finish what started in Dodge City. Gideon kept his hands visible and empty. Amelia, go to Dr. Chen. The girl shook her head firmly. I stay with Papa. The word hit Rivers like a physical blow. His scarred face twisted with rage as he realized his carefully planned revenge had backfired. Instead of destroying Gideon's capacity to love, he'd given him something precious to protect. Dr. Chen moved slowly toward her medical bag. The child needs her medication. She has episodes when frightened. Rivers nodded impatiently. Kane stepped closer, his hand resting on his pistol grip. The hired gunman spread out to cover all angles of escape, but Dr. Chen's medical bag contained more than medicine. Her fingers found the small mirror Margaret had left with specific instructions. Sunlight reflected off its surface, creating the signal pattern Margaret had described in her letter. Across the yard, Reverend Samuel Hayes saw the flash and understood. The church bell began tolling rapidly, its urgent rhythm carrying across Red Mesa. Within minutes, townspeople would respond to the emergency call. Rivers heard the bells and cursed. Finish this quickly. Kane drew his weapon, but Amelia stepped between the gunman and Gideon. Her small voice carried absolute conviction. You killed Papa Theo. You burned Maggie's house. You hurt everyone who loved me. Get out of the way, child. No. Amelia reached into her dress pocket and withdrew a folded paper. Papa Theo gave me this before he died. He said bad men would come for his money. Rivers snatched the document and read quickly. His face went pale as he recognized Theodore Ashford's handwriting. It was a detailed confession listing every instance of embezzlement, every stolen contract, every forged signature. Ashford had been building a case against his business partner for months. This proves nothing, Rivers said, but his voice lacked conviction. Papa Theo made copies, Amelia continued with devastating calm. He sent them to judges and marshals in 3 territories. He told me the bad man would come after I inherited everything. The sound of approaching horses cut through the morning air. Sheriff Williams arrived first, followed by a dozen armed townspeople. Reverend Hayes led the group, his usually gentle face set with grim determination. What's the meaning of this gathering? Williams demanded. Dr. Chen stepped forward. Mr. Cross just confessed to murdering Theodore Ashford and Margaret Drake. Rivers spun toward her. You have no proof of that claim. We have Amelia's testimony and Margaret's evidence. Gideon finally spoke, his voice carrying the authority that had once made outlaws surrender without a fight. Plus the confession you just made in front of witnesses. Kane looked nervously at the growing crowd. His hired gun seemed less confident facing a dozen armed citizens. The odds had shifted dramatically in just a few minutes. Rivers made his final desperate play. You're all making a mistake. I'm a legitimate businessman trying to locate a missing heiress. This man is the Falcon, a killer who should be in prison. Gideon Drake saved this town more times than we can count, Reverend Hayes replied. Before and after he put away his guns. He's corrupting an innocent child with his violent past. Amelia laughed, the sound startling everyone present. I'm not innocent. I saw you kill Papa Theo with poison. I saw you pay men to burn Maggie's house. I hid in the cellar and heard you planning everything. Her words carried the ring of absolute truth. Rivers realized his elaborate revenge had been undone by the very witness he'd tried to silence. Dr. Chen opened another envelope from her medical bag. Margaret's final letter contains detailed instructions about Amelia's legal status. Theodore Ashford filed adoption papers making her his legitimate heir. He also appointed Gideon Drake as her legal guardian in case of his death. Sheriff Williams examined the documents carefully. These appear genuine and properly notarized. Forgeries, Rivers protested. The notary stamp belongs to Judge Harrison in Austin, Williams replied. I know his seal personally. The crowd pressed closer as more townspeople arrived. Rivers found himself surrounded by citizens who'd made their choice. They'd seen Gideon's gentle care for the traumatized child. They'd witnessed his restraint in the face of armed provocation. Kane made a run for his horse but found his path blocked by farmers with shotguns. The hired gunmen threw down their weapons rather than face the aroused community. Joseph Rivers, Gideon said formally. You're under arrest for the murders of Theodore Ashford and Margaret Drake. Rivers drew his pistol in a final desperate act, but Amelia was already moving, her small body rolling away from danger with surprising agility. Gideon's hand flashed to his gun with the speed that had made him legendary. The shot echoed across the ranch yard. Rivers' weapon flew from his hand, his wrist shattered by Gideon's precise aim. The falcon had returned just long enough to protect his family, then stepped back into the shadows of the past. Dr. Chen rushed to treat Rivers' wound, while Sheriff Williams secured the prisoners. The crowd began to disperse, their crisis resolved through community action, rather than violence. Amelia ran to Gideon and wrapped her arms around his waist. "You didn't kill him, Papa." "You chose mercy." "That's what families do," Gideon replied. "We protect each other without becoming what we fight against." Reverend Hayes approached with a satisfied smile. "Margaret would be proud of you both." The danger had passed, but Gideon knew their real journey was just beginning. Sheriff Williams locked Rivers and Kane in the Red Mesa jail while Dr. Chen tended to the wounded man's shattered wrist. The hired gunmen faced charges as accessories, their loyalty bought with Rivers' stolen money now worthless. Word spread quickly through town about the confrontation and its resolution. Judge Harrison arrived from Austin 3 days later with a federal marshal and a stack of legal documents. Theodore Ashford's will was read publicly in the courthouse, confirming Amelia's inheritance and Gideon's guardianship. The railroad fortune included vast land holdings, mining rights, and enough money to buy half of Texas. "The child is officially Amelia Drake now," Judge Harrison announced. "Her inheritance remains in trust until she reaches majority, with Mr. Drake as sole administrator." Rivers sat in his cell, his bandaged hand a constant reminder of his failure. "You think this is over, Falcon? I have associates who'll finish what I started." Gideon visited the jail once, bringing Amelia so she could face her father's killer without fear. She stood before the bars with quiet dignity, no longer the terrified child from the train tracks. "Papa Theo said forgiveness makes us stronger than revenge," she told Rivers. "I forgive you, but I won't forget what you did." Rivers turned away, unable to meet her steady gaze. The legal proceedings took weeks to complete. Ashford's business empire required careful examination to separate legitimate holdings from Rivers' fraudulent additions. Dr. Chen worked closely with territorial accountants, using Margaret's hidden records to trace every stolen dollar. Amelia adapted to her new life with remarkable resilience. She helped Gideon with ranch chores, read voraciously from Margaret's book collection, and slowly opened up about her memories. The nightmares became less frequent as she learned to trust her safety. "Papa Theo taught me about railroads and business," she told Gideon one evening as they watched the sunset. "He said I'd need to know everything to protect our workers and their families." The weight of responsibility settled on Gideon's shoulders. He'd gone from lonely widower to guardian of one of Texas's wealthiest heiresses. The irony wasn't lost on him that a man who'd once lived by his gun now controlled an empire built on progress and commerce. Vincent Cross's true identity sent shockwaves through Austin's business community. Rivers had used forged credentials and stolen money to establish himself as a legitimate businessman. His arrest unraveled a network of corruption reaching into territorial government. Several prominent men faced charges for accepting bribes. Others lost fortunes invested in Rivers' fraudulent schemes. The scandal dominated newspaper headlines for months, with Amelia's story becoming a symbol of justice prevailing over greed. Dr. Chen decided to remain in Red Mesa permanently, establishing a medical practice that served the growing community. Her friendship with Margaret had evolved into deep respect for Gideon's character and genuine affection for Amelia. "She's healing well," Dr. Chen reported after another session with the girl. "The trauma will always be part of her, but it's not defining her future." Reverend Hayes performed a special blessing ceremony for the Drake family, officially welcoming Amelia into the community. The entire town attended, showing their support for the unlikely pair who'd found each other in tragedy. Railroad executives arrived from Denver and Kansas City, seeking meetings with Ashford's heir and her guardian. They expected to find a simple rancher overwhelmed by complex business matters. Instead, they encountered a man whose sharp intelligence had once tracked the most dangerous criminals in the territory. Gideon approached business negotiations with the same methodical patience that had made him legendary as the Falcon. He asked probing questions, demanded detailed explanations, and refused to be rushed into decisions affecting thousands of workers and their families. "You drive a hard bargain for a cattleman," one executive complained after a particularly lengthy negotiation. "I'm protecting Amelia's inheritance and her father's vision," Gideon replied. The girl herself proved remarkably astute for someone so young. She attended meetings quietly, listening to discussions about railway expansion, mining contracts, and territorial development. Her occasional questions revealed a sharp mind trained by Theodore Ashford's patient teaching. Papa Theo said railroads connect people and help them build better lives. She reminded the executives during one heated discussion about cutting worker wages. "We won't approve anything that hurts the families who depend on us." News of Rivers' trial reached Red Mesa through telegraph and newspaper reports. The evidence against him was overwhelming, with Margaret's documentation providing crucial proof of his crimes. He faced charges in multiple jurisdictions for murder, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Kane turned state's evidence in exchange for a lighter sentence, revealing the full scope of Rivers' revenge plot. The plan had taken years to implement, with Rivers carefully positioning himself in Ashford's business while gathering information about Margaret's connection to Gideon. "He was obsessed with making you suffer before he killed you," Kane testified. "Said death was too good for the man who destroyed his family." The hired gunmen received shorter sentences for their cooperation. Most were drifters who'd accepted Rivers' money without understanding the full scope of his plans. They faced charges for assault and conspiracy, but avoided murder convictions. As autumn approached, Gideon realized how completely his life had changed. The lonely widower had become a father to a remarkable child, a guardian of vast wealth, and a respected voice in territorial business circles. The transformation felt like Margaret's final gift to them both. Amelia thrived in the stable environment of ranch life, but she never forgot her responsibilities as Theodore Ashford's heir. She spent hours studying maps of railroad routes, reading reports about mining operations, and learning about the industries that generated her wealth. The scared, silent child from the train tracks had evolved into a confident young lady with clear moral convictions and sharp business instincts. The verdict came by telegraph on a cold November morning. Joseph Rivers would hang for the murders of Theodore Ashford and Margaret Drake. Kane received 15 years in territorial prison. The hired gunmen faced shorter sentences, their cooperation earning them mercy from the courts. Gideon read the telegram aloud to Amelia as she practiced her letters at the kitchen table. She nodded solemnly but showed no satisfaction at Rivers' fate. "Papa Theo always said justice should make things right, not just punish bad people." Her wisdom continued to surprise him. At 8 years old, she possessed a moral clarity that many adults never achieved. Theodore Ashford had raised her well during their brief time together. Dr. Chen arrived that afternoon with documents from Austin. The territorial governor had officially commended Gideon for his role in exposing the corruption network. Several other business leaders faced trial based on evidence recovered from Rivers' operations. "You've become quite famous," Dr. Chen observed. "The newspapers are calling you the man who cleaned up Texas business without firing a shot." Fame was the last thing Gideon wanted. He'd spent years building a quiet life, trying to leave the Falcon's reputation behind. But protecting Amelia had thrust him back into public attention. The railroad executives returned with new contracts and expanded proposals. Amelia's inheritance included controlling interest in 3 major rail lines, 2 mining operations, and vast stretches of undeveloped land. The wealth generated by these holdings could fund a small army. "We need your approval for the Colorado extension," the lead executive explained during their meeting. "The route will open new mining territories and create thousands of jobs." Amelia studied the proposed maps carefully. What happens to the families living in those areas? The question caught the executives off guard. Most business discussions focused on profits and logistics, not the human cost of expansion. "We'll offer fair compensation for any land purchases," one replied after an uncomfortable pause. "That's not enough," Amelia said firmly. Papa Theo taught me that railroads should help communities grow, not destroy them. We need guarantees about jobs for displaced families and schools for their children. Gideon watched with growing pride as his daughter negotiated like a seasoned businesswoman. She'd inherited more than money from Theodore Ashford. She'd absorbed his values and his vision for responsible development. The meetings stretched through the week as Amelia insisted on detailed provisions for worker safety, environmental protection, and community development. The executives grumbled about delays and additional costs, but they couldn't ignore the Ashford fortune's influence. "You're raising a formidable young lady," Dr. Chen commented after observing one particularly intense negotiation. "She'll reshape American business if she continues on this path." Winter brought unexpected visitors to the Drake Ranch. A delegation of tribal leaders arrived seeking an audience with the Ashford heir. Rivers mining operations had encroached on treaty lands, creating conflicts that needed resolution. Chief Standing Bear spoke through an interpreter, explaining how Rivers' men had diverted water sources and destroyed sacred sites. The government had ignored their complaints because of Rivers' political connections. Amelia listened respectfully to their concerns, then studied maps showing the disputed territories. "Papa Theo would never have approved stealing your land. We'll fix this." The restoration process took months of legal work and substantial financial investment. Amelia insisted on funding new wells, replanting destroyed areas, and establishing buffer zones around sacred sites. The tribal leaders blessed her efforts, calling her "Little Chief Who Keeps Promises." Spring brought news that Rivers had died in prison before his execution. A fellow inmate had killed him during a fight over gambling debts. Kane would serve his full sentence, his cooperation earning him protection, but not freedom. "Is it wrong that I'm relieved?" Gideon asked Dr. Chen as they watched Amelia play with the ranch dogs. "It means you're human," she replied. "Rivers represented everything you'd tried to leave behind. His death closes that chapter permanently." The railroad expansion projects moved forward with Amelia's modifications intact. The Colorado route included provisions for displaced families, environmental safeguards, and profit sharing with affected communities. Other business leaders began adopting similar practices, recognizing the Ashford model's long-term benefits. Amelia's reputation spread throughout the territory. Newspaper articles described the child heiress with a conscience who was revolutionizing American business practices. Speaking requests poured in from universities and business associations. "I'm not ready for speeches," Amelia told Gideon when Harvard University invited her to address their business school. "But maybe when I'm older." She remained focused on her education and responsibilities. Tutors arrived from Austin to supplement her schooling, teaching advanced mathematics, literature, and business law. She absorbed everything with remarkable speed and retention. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Gideon's cattle operation expanded, while Amelia's investments provided capital for improvements and growth. They'd become true partners, balancing his practical experience with her innovative vision. Dr. Chen's presence in their lives deepened as the months passed. She and Gideon found comfortable companionship in their shared dedication to Amelia's welfare. The possibility of romance remained unspoken but increasingly evident. "Sarah makes you smile again," Amelia observed one evening after Dr. Chen had stayed for dinner. "Margaret would approve." The girl's insight continued to amaze him. She'd learned to read people with the same precision her father had used to track criminals, but she employed her skills for healing rather than hunting. As Amelia's 9th birthday approached, Gideon reflected on their remarkable journey. The terrified child he'd found on the railroad tracks had become a confident young lady with clear moral convictions and impressive business acumen. The scared, lonely widower had rediscovered purpose and family in ways he'd never imagined possible. Margaret's sacrifice had saved them both, creating bonds that transcended blood and circumstance. Their future stretched ahead with unlimited possibilities, and unshakable foundation of love and mutual respect. 6 months after River's death, Red Mesa had transformed into a thriving community. Amelia's investments had funded a new school, a modern medical clinic, and expanded railroad service that brought prosperity to the region. The town council officially renamed the main thoroughfare Ashford Avenue in honor of her father's legacy. Gideon stood on his front porch watching Amelia teach reading lessons to a group of younger children. She'd insisted on sharing her education with others, establishing a scholarship fund for orphans throughout Texas. Her generosity had created opportunities for dozens of families who'd never dreamed of formal schooling. "She's remarkable," Dr. Chen said, joining him with 2 cups of coffee. Their friendship had deepened into something more precious over the months. Neither rushed toward romance, but their connection grew stronger with each shared sunset. The territorial governor had officially pardoned Gideon for any past actions as the Falcon, recognizing his service in exposing the river's corruption network. The gesture meant little legally, but everything symbolically. His violent past was finally laid to rest through official forgiveness. Amelia's business ventures continued expanding across the Western territories. Her insistence on ethical practices had attracted investors who valued long-term stability over quick profits. The Ashford fortune had doubled under her guidance, but she measured success in lives improved rather than dollars accumulated. "We're building something Papa Theo would be proud of," she told the board of directors during their quarterly meeting. At 9 years old, she commanded respect from men 3 times her age through sheer moral authority and sharp intelligence. The railroad extension into Colorado had created 2,000 jobs while preserving native lands and water rights. Other companies began adopting Amelia's model, recognizing that sustainable development generated better returns than exploitation. Judge Harrison visited from Austin to finalize Amelia's legal status and review the trust arrangements. Her inheritance would remain under Gideon's administration until her 18th birthday, but she'd already proven capable of managing vast responsibilities. "Most adults couldn't handle what she's accomplished," the judge observed privately. Theodore Ashford trained her well for leadership. The anniversary of Margaret's death brought the 3 of them to her gravesite with fresh flowers and quiet prayers. Amelia had commissioned a new headstone listing Margaret as beloved wife, devoted friend, protector of children. The inscription captured her multifaceted legacy perfectly. "She saved us both," Amelia whispered, placing white roses on the marble marker. "Everything good in our lives started with her love." Dr. Chen squeezed Gideon's hand as tears ran down his weathered cheeks. The grief would never fully disappear, but it had transformed into grateful remembrance rather than crushing loss. Spring brought news that Kane had died in prison, succumbing to pneumonia after 2 years of incarceration. His death closed the final chapter of River's revenge plot, leaving no loose threads or unfinished business. "I'm sorry he never found peace," Amelia said when they received the notification. Her capacity for forgiveness continued to humble Gideon, who still struggled with harder emotions toward their former enemies. The ranch had become a gathering place for travelers and dignitaries seeking audiences with the famous child heiress. Amelia received visitors with gracious hospitality but never allowed meetings to interfere with her education or family time. "Business serves people, not the other way around," she explained to a group of railroad executives who'd complained about her scheduling priorities. "Papa Gideon taught me that some things matter more than money." Her influence on American business practices was already being documented by historians and economists. Several universities had established scholarship programs based on her ethical investment model. The Ashford principles were being taught in business schools across the eastern states. Dr. Chen's medical practice had grown to serve 3 counties, with Amelia funding a network of clinics that provided health care to underserved communities. The partnership between medical expertise and financial resources created a template other regions began copying. As summer arrived, Gideon realized how completely his identity had changed. The lonely widower and former bounty hunter had become a respected businessman, devoted father, and community leader. Amelia's presence had redeemed every dark chapter of his past. "You're not the Falcon anymore," she observed one evening as they reviewed business reports together. "You're Papa Gideon, the man who protects people by building better lives for them." The transformation felt like Margaret's final gift to both of them. Her sacrifice had created not just their survival, but their prosperity and purpose. Dr. Chen joined them for dinner more frequently as the months passed. Her gentle presence brought healing to old wounds and hope for future happiness. Amelia actively encouraged the developing romance with subtle matchmaking that amused both adults. "Sarah makes good biscuits," she announced after one particularly successful meal. "And she laughs at your jokes even when they're not funny, Papa. That's true love." Their wedding took place the following autumn in Red Mesa's new church, with Amelia serving as the flower girl and the entire community celebrating. The ceremony symbolized not just their union, but the completion of their family's healing journey. Amelia's 10th birthday brought delegations from Washington seeking her input on territorial development policies. She met with senators and congressmen, sharing insights about sustainable growth that influenced national legislation. "I'm still just a little girl learning from Papa Gideon and Mama Sarah," she told reporters who'd gathered for interviews. "But Papa Theo taught me that even children can make the world better if they try hard enough." As they stood together watching another sunset paint the Texas sky in brilliant colors, Gideon reflected on the miracle of their lives. The unwanted child and the broken widower had found redemption in each other's love. Amelia leaned against his shoulder, her small hand finding his calloused fingers. "We're home now, Papa. All of us together, just like Margaret planned." Their family was complete, their future bright with unlimited possibilities built on foundations of love, justice, and hope that would endure for generations.